Right, hello, greetings. It's Thomas Daffern here. Blessed be, shalom, salam, and all the rest of it. It's Sunday the 7th of February, and I'm doing my weekly fasting Sunday talk for a philosophical look at the world, what's going on, and a few comments, really. It's my little attempt to share my few insights into world affairs from this centre here in France, the European Peace Museum, which is a thriving hub for intellectual activity for peace, and it's the headquarters of the European World Intellectual Forum, which I have the honour to coordinate. So yes, to start with, well, we had a very good online Zoom conference for the WIF on the 30th of January. It's the last, the 30th of each month. Although in February it'll be the 28th. And yeah, a good, excellent exchange of views. We had David Lorimer speak from the Scientific and Medical Network about the very interesting Galileo Commission's work, and his spiritual hero, Peter Durnov, who was a Bulgarian mystic and esoteric thinker. And then we heard from Peter Marshall, who's an intellectual historian, very learned and prolific author, brilliant mind, who spoke from Wales. And we had Dr. Aaron Sikawa, who's a brain scientist, neurologist, about conflict, anger, aggression, as studied from brain science. I mean, it's a huge topic. And then we had other other contributions from other colleagues. So that's ongoing work, and if you want to get involved, and if you think you have something really important to contribute intellectually to navigating a way out of our trapped labyrinth of craziness, please get in touch by email. We're a bit like Theseus, stuck in the labyrinth, up against a minotaur we can't see, we don't know its provenance, but it's pretty beastly. We don't really have a thread to get back out. I mean, the world's leaders have fallen into, most of them, I mean, thank God for Biden, but a lot of them have fallen into a sort of, a huddle of evil, Boris Johnson included. I mean, these people are intellectually incapable of finding a way out of this labyrinth because they haven't got a moral distinction between right and wrong. It's not in their genes, it's not in their mindset, and it's not in their political party machinery, nor was it for Trump. The only way to get rid of these people is actually through law, through proving corruption, proving malfeasance. And I think there's enough evidence. Boris Johnson, of course, should have been taken to court years ago. I mean, he is not fit to be any kind of public civil servant. Should be disbarred from office for his lies and skullduggery. And I want to start really by throwing myself into the question of Brexit, because that's why I began these weekly fasts. I was so appalled at the decision made by Theresa May to implement in full, as if it was a mandatory result, what had been an advisory election referendum called foolishly by David Cameron, without putting in absolutely cast iron guarantees that this will not be implemented unless 60% threshold is met, or whatever. Every other single country that ever runs a referendum on something this big always puts in a caveat to protect. Otherwise, it's like asking a bunch of drunken footballers if they want to go and, take, a whole crate of beers down to the beach and go swimming, at 2 a.m. when they're already drunk. I mean, of course people will vote for, if they're told lies and nonsense, as happened during that referendum. It's easy to swing public opinion into any direction it wants. And that's what happened at that Brexit referendum. The dark powers deliberately engineered it to pull people out of the European Union for their own advantage. I've spoken about this endlessly. The evidence is all there. It was done with military-style campaigning, psyops, by people connected with Nigel Nixon's company and Cambridge Analytica and Steve Bannon. These are facts that, I'm a historian, I know what I'm talking about. These are historical facts that are undeniable. Brexit was the result of a military psyops operation engineered by people on the right of politics who want war, who want militarism, who want destabilisation, and who saw the European Union as a threat because it stands for democracy, liberal democracy, human rights, and peace and freedom of movement, and ultimately for all the things that enabled it to win the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, I'm a peace activist, a peace philosopher. Of course I support the European Union because of its mission as a peace project. Ever since Jean Monnet dreamed it up, and the others involved, Schuman and so on, they were peace visionaries. And I've studied the history of federalism, the history of that European ideal enough to know that people like William Beveridge, who after whom the Beveridge Hall at Senate House in the University of London is named, he was a great federalist, and he got the University of London to be a federation of colleges, which I'm pleased my PhD came from. Beveridge was a great man and a visionary. He would be appalled at the fanatical right-wing people that were drummed into action through this psyops that created Brexit. Shocking. So that's why I'm doing this weekly fast. Until its results are reversed, I will continue to do that. And it will be reversed. And I'm going to explain how and why and when in this little broadcast. But the first thing I want to do is take you back down memory lane, because I have a sort of personal narrative about this. This is personal to me. I lived in Scotland for 7 years. I've travelled all over the world. I've been to 35 countries. I'm an internationalist. I was born in Montreal, which is one of the great international cities on the planet. I'm an international citizen. I'm a world citizen. I have a world citizen passport. I've been a member of many World Federalist type groups trying to get a safer planet through the Canadian branch, which I joined. And I've spoken at the UN headquarters twice. I've travelled, as I say, in 35 countries, and I've lived in Canada, England, Wales, Scotland, and now France. And I've travelled to India 10 times. I'm like an adopted Indian citizen as well. To me, the whole planet, it's a small planet, this. I love the whole of it. I hope I get to another 50 countries in my lifetime. I hope we all get out of this ridiculous pandemic lockdown and we can go travelling again. The European Union was a beautiful thing because you can travel freely and the frontiers are less important. I remember going on my Interrail travels when I was a wee 25-year-old, and just the beauty of getting on a train in Paris and being able to wake up in Vienna, or going down, I went down by train through Skopje all the way to Athens. And it's that sense of Europe's size and nobility and heritage that's so important to me. As a philosopher and a thinker and a historian, I specialise my degrees in European and world history, including world intellectual and European philosophy and so on. And I love all of it. And I love Britain. Obviously that's mainly my adopted home, because it's part of that, and we contributed hugely to the European intellectual landscape. People like Newton and Leibniz and Napier, the Scotsman, and John Dee, and these people were the founders of modern maths, which I'm writing a book about on religious maths. And I know how much British and European intellectual history is interconnected. You can't pretend they're not if you have any knowledge about this. The whole university system that we use in Britain, and I'm a proud product of, was a European invention, the University of Paris. Thank you very much. And for a long time, all our great scholars used to go to Paris, including from Scotland, like Duns Scotus and so on. So it's a catastrophe to us intellectually and morally and spiritually, as well as economically. The financial impact is disastrous. Exports to the European Union are down 64% from what they were last year because of the paperwork and the nonsense at the borders. I mean, anyone with a brain could have spotted all this. The people that wanted it are destructivists. They've infiltrated the British media. They'd obviously somehow collared the BBC into acquiescence through probably blackmail, bribery, terrorism, intellectual terrorism, and created this thought world that Brexit is the best thing ever and the people voted for it and we have to do it. All that is a lie. The people did not vote for it. The people are not that stupid. The people, I mean the aggregate population of Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland and England, 60% of them did not vote for Brexit. And those views should be taken into account. However, it was all Theresa May who did this. Now, where it's personal is that I had met Theresa May when I was teaching in the secondary schools in Britain, teaching in many schools at all levels of the social spectrum. And in one of the schools I taught in, Theresa May came in to give a lecture to the politics department for the sixth form girls. And she was standing up there, you know, this was when she was only a shadow minister. And I was impressed. I thought, this is a woman with a brain. You know, this is an intelligent woman. She told a bit about her family history, how she'd been the daughter of a vicar in Wiltshire, and her first introduction to politics was licking stamped envelopes for sending out flyers for the, vote Tory. And her dad, being a vicar, was allowing this to happen on the kitchen table of the vicarage. Now, to be honest, he shouldn't have been doing that. I think that was Theresa's first induction into irregularity in politics. So Theresa, I think, you know, that's a sign that you were maybe getting off on the wrong foot. Anyway, fast forward, she then joined the Tory party, career up the pole, and eventually became a shadow minister, which is when I met her. And we had a talk, and I thought this is a woman of some intelligence that one could actually talk to about ethics. Don't forget, she was here at a school. I was teaching ethics and philosophy and thinking skills, actually, in that school. And, I was simply engaged with her on some points of ethics and philosophy, and she gave a reasonable answer. And I thought, okay, so then I kept in touch. I wrote to her a couple of times. And then I watched as she became Prime Minister when David Cameron stepped aside. And I thought, okay, there's an intelligent woman taking over. Okay. But I was appalled when she then went ahead and said, we are going to do Brexit. We're going to implement it fully, lock, stock and barrel. It's that, No nuance, no, but there's a problem the Scots didn't vote for it. There's a problem the Northern Irish didn't vote for it. Maybe we need to do some thinking. Maybe we should do some consulting. Maybe we should get a constitutional assembly together and think this through. No, nothing like that. Nothing that intelligent. Just absolute, we're doing Brexit. End of story. And that was her line from day one. And to be honest, I was appalled. I was thinking, this woman cannot be serious. This woman is surely more intelligent than that. And I wrote to her, dear Theresa, sorry to bother you, you're Prime Minister now. Do you remember me? We met some years ago. I was just a teacher. And I'm warning you about this Brexit thing you're cooking up. It's not going to go down very well in Scotland. I was still in Scotland at that point and loving it. And I said, look, if you're going to implement on the basis of this referendum result, which was advisory, it was a consultative thing, it need not be interpreted in this way. If you're now going to push through an extreme or hard Brexit against the will of the Scottish people, given all that they've gone through in history, and I'd learned a lot about this from living in Scotland, that you're not taught in English schools, about seeing history from the perspective of Scotland, which was a proud independent nation, for most of its existence. I said, the Scots will leave the UK over this. I warned her. I did so in all decency and honour, as one ought to do to one's Prime Minister, if you have some information that they need to know. I warned her and I said, this is the historic phrase I used, I said, look, Theresa, if you do this hard Brexit thing, you will only be able to keep Scotland in the UK by sending tanks onto the streets of Glasgow. Okay. So that is still my position. You know, nothing's happened to change that view. Except that I realise that now the British state doesn't use tanks on the streets of Glasgow. It uses cyber warfare and information warfare and infiltration of the SNP and deliberate planting of suspicion and fake news. You know, it uses the Trump-type Cambridge Analytica tactics to try and destroy the Scottish independence movement. And that's what it's actively doing at the moment. That's how it actively sought to destabilise the Scottish independence movement and is still doing so. Okay, so anyway, her reply was bland, nondescript, and I can just say that we've not had a proper communication ever since. Her last letter to me when I wrote, because I warned her 3 times, I felt a bit like, you know, the Sibylline Oracle. And if you're not aware of the reference, look it up. And yeah, the final one was just like a bland, like, you know, obviously her antennae, her what I thought was her intelligence and her moral intelligence, you know, was parked at the door of Downing Street. Now something's come up that I want to share that's very relevant to this. That's my personal narrative. Now this is in the public domain. And everything, obviously, I've said is totally 100% true. I'm giving the truth here. So Philip Hammond has given an interview to The Guardian a couple of days ago. Now, Philip Hammond was, you know, had a few remnants of the decent Tory in him. He was intelligent. He had a certain sense of ethics. He stood as leader of the Tory party after Theresa May announced she was stepping down. And if he'd been leader of the Tory party, we'd be facing a slightly different prospect than under Boris Johnson, who is morally unfit to be the leader of anything apart from possibly a prison cabal. Philip Hammond was and is a good man, and he's revealed something in an interview with The Guardian that is absolutely very important, and it's directly relevant to my personal narrative. I want to start this talk by quoting from it. Philip Hammond has given an interview. This is from their writer, Andrew Brown, published on Friday, the 5th of Feb, just a few days ago. Philip Hammond has given an interview that once more has ripped open the wounds of the Conservative Party over Brexit. He says some deliberately revealing things. That Theresa May genuinely had no idea what sort of a Brexit she intended. So that when she made him Chancellor after the referendum, quotes, "I sat in the cabinet room on that evening, and the only other person in the room was Fiona Hill. I did ask her about Brexit, and she said to me, 'Brexit means Brexit.' That was it. That was the only discussion we had about it." End of quotes. I think she believed that she could park Brexit as just something we will get done. It's been decided. Now let's move on. And let me tell you about the Theresa May vision of the future. What the master plan was, she didn't know, because Nick Timothy hadn't formulated it at that stage. End of quotes. So that revelation from Philip Hammond in the national press 2 days ago, to me is like a bombshell. It's absolutely, you know, revealing of what I've known all along, and what anyone who's been looking at this situation from afar can, or from close up or living through it, can have worked out. What it shows is that Theresa May was really elevated above her station. She shouldn't have been Prime Minister. You know, you can't assume the governance of a huge and powerful and important nation like the United Kingdom and all its dependent territories and the Commonwealth and the whole that it represents, the whole history, heritage and so on, and not have a plan, and not even have a concept. It's like appointing... Okay, so I'm going to reveal something here. My great-great-grandfather was the porter at Eton College, where Boris Johnson went to school. He was on my father's mother's side in my family history. I've been researching this. It's interesting. He was in the Navy. A good man, I think, from what I can tell. He was trained on the HMS Victory, the flagship of the English Navy, British Navy, still to this day. And he sailed all over the world. We know he went to Beirut in 1861 on a ship. Anyway, he eventually retired and he ended up living in Eton. And he became the porter to Eton College. Now, the boys are going in and out, and he's quite important, the porter. He would have chatted to them, got friends with this and that, Lord and, whatever, the son of. The Boris Johnson of the day. And Eton, is a good school. But he wasn't headmaster material, right? So appointing him suddenly, the porter of Eton College, to be headmaster wouldn't have been appropriate. I don't think he even had a degree, let alone a sort of, years of experience as an educator to become the head of Eton College. Now, it seems to me that Theresa May's been also elevated above her station. It's like the porter of Eton College suddenly being made the headmaster. That is shown by the fact that she had no clue as to what actually Brexit implied, what its implications would be for the rest of the UK, for relations with Scotland and Northern Ireland, and for the rest of Europe and for the economy in general. She just had not thought it out. Now, this is the difference between, with all due respect, a trained intellectual and a kind of amateur who just bumbles her way through Women's Institute meetings and local Tory party fetes and gets, a geography degree somewhere along the way and talks to the right people and ends up a high bigwig in the Tory party. The Tory party is sort of the route for amateur incompetence to get into positions of power, and it's been operated like that since it was set up. It runs on a sort of system of patronage and money. And now, half of the emigres of Russia and dodgy money all around the world are buying places in the Conservative Party and influence. And it's become the chic thing for billionaires who are on the run from the law somewhere else. I wouldn't at all be surprised if Donald Trump doesn't eventually take refuge in London and, buy his way into the Tory party. He's probably going to end up applying to do that. And I'm pretty sure that the British people won't be comfortable with that. But the people that are running the Tory party will be happy with that. Before he'll be Prime Minister. You can buy your way in. Now, I come from a different political tradition that's completely opposed to this patronage and incompetence, this bumbling incompetence. I'm the guy that organised a meeting in where Gladstone has his library at St Daniel's in the wake of the 9/11 attacks on the educational implications of 9/11. I was trained in Wales as a teacher. I'm a left liberal, activist with green tendencies, and humane socialist, libertarian conscience, No, these Tories are not. They haven't got a clue. So confronted with the reality of Brexit, blank, nothing. Brexit means Brexit. Let's get it done. I mean, talk about moral incompetence and intellectual incompetence. I mean, I am shocked that such a person could have got into the fingers on the levers of power. Well, if you thought Theresa May was bad, and I think she was incompetent and elevated way above her station, Boris Johnson is like, 100 times worse. He's the final result of what you get when you open these sort of plutocratic political parties like the Conservative Party to people without either moral or intellectual intelligence. We've seen a brilliant essay by Rory Stewart, who is a clever and a reasonably morally intelligent Conservative, and makes May and Johnson look like nincompoops, explaining the many ways that Boris Johnson has perfected the art of lying. That's my complaint against Johnson and all that he stands for. and it's about mendacity. And read Rory Stewart on the types of lying that Johnson does. And I was the first guy to propose that parliamentarians have to swear an oath of veracity. And if they're caught out, if they're deliberately lying, they lose office immediately. Now you can find other petitions saying the same thing, but my website, which I designed, is on the duty of veracity. I think should be adopted in democracies worldwide, including in America and in Britain and every democracy, including the European Union. These politicians who get their salaries through serving the people should the least they can do is tell the truth. You may not like what they say, you may not agree with what they say, but they have to tell the truth. And that means not lying. You can approach it negatively. But unfortunately we've ended up, with that veracity bill that I proposed has been ignored. And it's not, it's come to pass that we've had deceit and dissimulation and lying has taken over the House of Commons under Boris Johnson. So, and that was the result that flourished in, the Brexit decision and the catastrophe that's causing to the nation. And I think to the, to the well-being of the planet, actually. So let's move on. I want to talk about morality, because The Guardian also reports that Theresa May has accused Boris Johnson of losing Britain's place of moral leadership in the world. I mean, for God's sake, Theresa, you've got to be kidding, right? I mean, Britain lost her place of moral leadership in the world the day you announced you're going to pursue a hard Brexit, whatever happens. That was the moment at which it fell. And that was your doing, right? Just work that out. Of course, it's nosedived much more under Boris Johnson, your successor. But it began under you. I've tried to suggest a way that people can work out what is ethical from what isn't. It is complex, I'm not. I mean, if I'd have been teaching these people, I would have had to level with them and say, look, it's difficult, especially when you're given temptations of power and, blah, blah, blah. No, you have to have a calculus to work out what is right and wrong, what is ethical. And that's why I wrote a book and published it a few months ago called Towards an Ethical Calculus, which is about how to make complex decisions in a complex world. And it provides a sort of scientific way of working out mathematically what is the difference between right and wrong in any given choice situation you're confronted with. And I do recommend that work to you. And if only Theresa May had read that book on the morning after she was suddenly propelled into being Prime Minister, she would have realised, as I did when I did the sums, that Brexit was a unmitigated disaster. There is another thing, though, that British imperialism has done other things before that, are morally dodgy, to put it mildly. I mean, the Amritsar massacre, the Sikhs supporting the white apartheid regime indirectly, largely, until in the end, finally, we got tough on them and they let Mandela out and so on. But, it took a long time. And the whole history of slavery and the colonisation of America. There's a lot of dodgy things that Britain did in their history. And I think we have to differentiate between what I mean by what Britain did. What I mean is the ruling elites based in Westminster and Windsor, the royal Privy Council-led secret elites. It was the Privy Council under William III that organised the Culloden massacre, sorry, not the Clud Massacre, the Glencoe Massacre, just after William had become King of England and Scotland through the so-called Glorious Revolution, and ousted his father-in-law, James II. Sort of dodgy constitutional issues were going on at that point. But what they did with the Glencoe Massacre was unconscionable. And I've spoken about that before. If you go into the history books, you see that it was an act of deliberate massacre and revenge by an elite based in Westminster, run through the Privy Council, to deliberately massacre a bunch of Scottish, reluctant signers of the acceptance of William as the rightful King of Britain. They were going to do it, but they were a bit late because of snow and weather conditions. And as a result, William and his ministers decided to make an exception and a punishment. And so hundreds were massacred, in their beds. So the history of the English-dominated regimes through the Privy Council and the Crown and Parliament in Westminster is shocking when you look at it from a Scottish perspective. I only realised this by researching in depth Scottish history when I lived there, meeting wonderful Scottish people, hearing from their stories, and seeing the world upside down from the grassroots, from the Celtic fringe. I'd already learned to see this from the Irish perspective through my involvement with setting up the Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Ireland and Britain. I'd learned to see history from the Irish perspective. And, all the Irish communities, the Protestant Ulster community, the Catholic Unionist community, reunion of the island community. And although they're called the nationalist community, actually you could call them the authentic Unionist community. And from the pagan Druid community in Ireland, which I've got lots of friends among, and which predate the split between Protestant and Catholic Irish. So my job as a philosopher has been to try and make peace here on this island of Ireland, and Brexit again is threatening that. And it's obvious that the people of Ireland are not benefiting and never will, and will want to vote as soon as possible to reunify the island of Ireland into one country. And I just hope that's done peacefully and constitutionally. What is it? Why am I upset about Theresa May's moral and intellectual ignorance, that she had no plan, had no clue what she was doing when she triggered Brexit? Okay, so she complains to Boris Johnson in her letter or her article that, the world is too absolute, that politics has to go back to compromise. It's not about absolutes. And she presents, herself as a voice of doubt and compromise and seeing things all sides. This is hypocrisy, because if she'd have actually had the intelligence to be in that place when she became Prime Minister, she would never have actioned Brexit, which was the actions of an absolutist. By interpreting a advisory referendum as an absolute definitive judgment, she introduced absolutism into British politics. And that's the sting that we're all suffering from. That's where the poison got in. I think the only solution is to bring back uncertainty and doubt. And that's what Hammond was quite good at. That's what Rory Stewart is quite good at. That, to me, is the essence of intellectual humility. You see, the absolutist types, like the QAnon conspirators that attacked the Capitol, they're absolutely sure that their narrative is correct and that all liberals are evil paedophiles, all